common man in the Niger Delta, who is the one suffering the result of this degradation. How successful have these agitating groups been in achieving results that the common man has benefited from?
Okay. Actually, what they've achieved so far is tokenism. Tokenism in the sense that we had the president from the Niger Delta. That's all they've had, and that's what I've always told people, that just merely having somebody from your region as the president of Nigeria will not solve your problems. For instance, the UNEP report, United Nations Environmental Program report, on the Ogoni land cleanup, recommended certain things, measures that should be put in place to remedy the situation in Ogoni land. And at the end of the day, we had a president from the Niger Delta, President Goodluck Jonathan, and he sat on the report. The report was gathering dust. Now it took a president from the northwest, Katsina, to go ahead and push for the implementation of this report, and which was recently launched in Ogoni land. So that's what I always tell people. You just saying you want somebody from your region is not going to solve your problem. So what they needed to have done is they shouldn't have allowed the wrong people to hijack their struggle. It's a genuine struggle. And from the book I've written, I wrote a book on this, on the challenges in Niger Delta and how to solve it. What is going to solve the problem is for the right people to own the struggle. Right now, the wrong people own the struggle, and they are profiting from it. They become billionaires overnight.
So they benefited, not the common man.
Not the communities. The communities did not benefit. You have a couple of billionaires, overnight billionaires. Then you have, more people impoverished. So one of the things I mentioned in the book is that, the petroleum industry bill, should be passed. They should push for it to be passed. Right now, it's just gathering dust at the National Assembly, because the Senate version of the bill has a provision that covers the issue of how to address the issue of friction between the oil communities and the oil companies, and the oil companies and the government. One of the things that is recommended is the host community fund, Petroleum Host Community Fund, which has to do with 10% of the revenue of the oil companies being set aside. That's the net revenue after taxes and royalties have been removed. So that when it's set aside, it will be put in a fund, and it will be invested in those communities for infrastructural purposes, like for building of schools and hospitals and the rest of it. And when you have this kind of fund in place, it's going to reduce friction, because the people in the region will see that they are benefiting. So instead of having a situation where every state just goes cap in hand to collect, from the oil revenue that is dwindling, as we speak now, many pipelines have been blown up. The amount of production, the production of Nigeria, oil production of Nigeria has gone down, has reduced drastically by like 30 to 40%. It should have been 2-point-something million barrels a day. It's now 1.5 to 1.6 million barrels a day. So if you don't address this, the revenue that the states are going to collect is going to reduce anyway. So why don't you address it and allow the people in the communities to get those resources? So that, and then one of the provisions says that once the resources are in place, if a pipeline is blown up in a particular community, so a part of the fund will be used for the cleanup of the community, and will also be used for the reconstruction of the pipelines and infrastructure that have been destroyed.
And the question will be, who would execute that fund?
Those are issues like there's a particular government agency in charge of the issue of transparency in the oil industry, and that agency criticized that provision, that they've not actually spelled out how the fund is going to be managed. And those are the things, that's why you have legislators in place. They can call for stakeholders to come in and explain to them what they think government can do, what can go into the provision to strengthen that particular provision, because the provision is good on the face of it. But like you said, they might need to fine-tune some aspects of it that has to do with how do you manage the funds, who are the people that are going to be in charge of it, how do you prevent
the details of
how it's going to be handled. But with that kind of fund in place, and another thing is, what I also mentioned in the book is the fact that there's an organization called Indoroma, an Indian organization that bought into LMA petrochemical plant in Rivers State, and they used that model even without a legislation on their own. They entered into an agreement with the community, and a certain percentage of profits were being set aside to take care of infrastructure for the community. And as a result, the friction that had existed between LMA Petrochemical Company, which was 100% owned by NNPC, and the community ceased immediately, because they were getting about 4 billion on a yearly basis. 4 billion naira was going into the community fund, and they were well taken care of. People were happy. And that model is a model that probably inspired what's in the petroleum industry bill. The question is, why is it languishing in the National Assembly? We have a National Assembly that's they are very quick to try and change anti-corruption laws to suit themselves. But this same National Assembly will not take care of something that has to do with the revenue of the country, because they call the Niger Delta the goose that lays the golden egg, and at the end of the day, they are not doing anything about it, and they are there collecting huge allowances. So my question is to the National Assembly is, when are you going to pass the petroleum industry bill?
Mr. Kintude, that thing about the leaders of the Niger Delta, you talked about members of the National Assembly who will not pass that kind of, who will not pursue that kind of bill to get it passed. Question of leaders of the Niger Delta. You talked about a regional system, the regional government. Who would manage that regional government? Someone's asking, is it the same people who are there that will not fight to pass a petroleum industry bill with that kind of provision that will take care of communities? I mean, what they call it now, host community fund.
Yeah.
Is it those kind of people that would manage a regional government, or governors who are not thinking about how to generate revenue, but are always going to Abuja to collect?
It goes back to the people eventually, because I mean, they say people get the kind of government that it requires. We are all empowered to vote right, but there are so many factors that we consider which are not in our interests when it comes to voting, when it comes to electing our leaders. I think that this is an opportunity for not just Niger Delta, but the entire country to begin to look at the quality of leadership that we have, the quality of leadership that we produce. Because even when we talk about regional government, like I suggested, like you also rightly pointed out, we're still going to end up having the same kind of quality of leaders that we have, unless the people themselves realize the power of their votes. It's very important for us to realize that it is not that man who comes to me and gives me money that I will have to vote for. I'm going to look at the quality of what is done in his life, the quality of impact is made on other people's life. And that's what is going to determine where I vote. It is not about whether the man comes from my village or from my region or from anywhere. Like he rightly pointed out, Dr. Goodluck is from Niger Delta. The UNED report was passed to his government, and he never did anything about it. A president from outside that region is implementing that project. So it goes back to the fact that the man doesn't have to come from my family. As long as I know that he has a quality that will make our region, our environment be better, I will have to vote for him. So I'm still saying that apart from the regional government that that is being proposed, we also need to look at ourselves and begin to elect people who have the aspirations, who have the interest of the people that they represent at heart. I don't think that the guys in the National Assembly have that kind of quality. I don't think that the governors that we have now, a lot of them don't have that kind of quality. The leaders we have now don't have that quality. They think about themselves first and foremost. We're talking about a country that is bleeding economically, and you don't see that reduction in the lifestyle of those who are leading us. It tells you that these guys don't care about us. They don't care about us. So we have to sit down and ask ourselves the right questions and begin to do the right things. Elections will come in another 3 years. We still find that the same set of people who we have been complaining about misleading us will be the same set of people that we, the ordinary people who have the power, who have the, who vote for. So that's we have to ask ourselves that question: what do we want of our environment? What do we want of Nigeria? What do we want of our state, of our constituency? If we answer those questions rightly, then we'll be able to have the right leaders that we desire.
Okay. Staying with you,
yeah.
The Ogoni cleanup has been flagged off. Yeah. And even though we understand that it really won't be clean for another 15, 20 years, yes. But in the short term, how is this going to affect the lives of those in that environment?
Well, it's going to be, the government has to devise some short-term measures to ensure that life continues in that environment while the long-term plan is being worked on. It's going to affect there because, I mean, the people of that environment basically live on fishing and farming. It then means that government has to have some kind of intervention to ensure that in the meantime, when they are unable to do those things, fishing and farming, they are able to live with their lives. And some health intervention will also come into place to ensure that they live a good life. So while we are working on the UNEP plan, which is good not only for Ogoni land, but the entire Niger Delta region that has been degraded. So the government needs to now find some short term. It's just like we talk about palliatives in some other sector of our life. Government also come up with palliatives for those communities that are affected by what is going on now. As good as that will be for them, but it take a long while. I mean, if you say you want to save a life and it's going to take some period of time, that person has to be alive that period to benefit from it. So you have to look for some ways of keeping that individual alive.
Okay, and just before, we have to take a very quick break, and then we'll come back to continue the conversation. Okay. But just as we're going on that break, Olubenga Boluwaji says, how many governors have brought a new source of revenue to their state since the inception of this republic? He says leadership is key. We're back in a moment. Please don't go away.